Hey friends, Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 61, Seth Mosley. Hey, I just want to remind you, in case you forgot, the 5-day Songwriting for Guitar boot camp starts this week. I'm going to be going live 5 days in a row, giving you helpful hints, things that you can actually start applying to your songwriting right now. And here's an even cooler thing. Before the live session, I'm going live for another hour before. I'm going to be answering questions on the fly. So regardless if it's songwriting, guitar, production, licensing, whatever you want to dig in, if you're feeling like you're brand new to the process and you got questions, maybe you've been doing this for a while and things just are so confusing or they're not working out the way you wanted, you got to be there. And I've got cool special guests that will be popping in as well. This is going to be 2 hours of live content, 5 days in a row you're going to be getting. Replays available, so believe me, this is well worth signing up. So go to songwritingforguitar.com right now and jump in because you don't want to miss this. Now, Seth is a Grammy Dove award-winning songwriter. He's had number ones on the Billboard chart. He has been CSAC Songwriter of the Year. And here's the thing. It's all amazing and impressive, but you know what's even cooler? The story of how he got there. And that's what we're going to get into, because there are moments when songwriters have to pivot. They have to make crucial decisions. And sometimes that's not always easy, but Seth frames it so well. And I think regardless if you're a seasoned songwriter, if you're someone new to this craft, this is something that you'll want to listen to, maybe even take a few notes. Because I know as I was talking to him, I was like, let me just jot that down. So we are going to jump into it. Episode number 61, Seth Mosley. Seth, thanks for being here, taking the time out of your day to do this, especially on a Monday.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Mondays, this was a good way to break up the day. So
excellent. Thanks. You know, it's funny, just as before we hit record, I was like, you know, it's crazy because you've got Grammys, you got Doves. Well, you were CSAC, Songwriter of the Year. You've got Billboard number ones. But I don't think if you went down the street and you said, hey, quickly, do you know who I am? They'd be like, oh, but you have all this amazing work. And that is so cool. And I'd just be curious, because I think people sometimes think you need to have a huge name to make it in music. I'm going to make it to the top. But here you are doing the thing you love, doing it well, creating a company, creating even courses to help songwriters. How did this start? Like, where was that core where you were like, I think I want to do this and pursue this?
It's a great question. And you're right. I know most people would not know who Seth Mosley is. And I am perfectly okay with that. I always say, I used to do the band thing and we had a record deal and had some radio success. So we started to see I started to feel a little bit of what that was to be in front of people and have somebody recognize you or whatever. But on a super small scale, I was like, I don't think that's for me. And I got married. My wife does not like people noticing her at all. So it's like, it just works better for us to be completely anonymous. But yeah, no, I got into music like most people. You start out thinking you're going to be the artist and you're going to be the one songs and writing the songs. I started writing in my parents' basement. I had a studio. Studio was a loose term. I had some equipment that I had bought and just started learning to record myself. Started playing out in coffee shops when I was in high school. Eventually, my friends' bands started coming over and recording with me in high school. So I had a little, home recording studio operation that I would, record their bands and basically learn how to produce, and essentially was kind of helping them with arrangements and songwriting too. I just didn't really know what it was at the time. They just needed good sounding recordings. And I lived in a small town where there just wasn't really access to that. So I kind of just had to figure it out. This is pre-YouTube. I sort of just there was a moment when one of my friends' bands, I had done a 5-song EP for them. And then they went down the road and recorded one single with this guy who was a quote, big name producer in Southern Ohio. And they brought it back and I was like, okay, this sounds different than my stuff, but I see what he's doing. By listening to that recording, I was like, oh, so you can edit the drums. I didn't know you could do that. As far as quantizing performances. And I was like, oh yeah. 'Cause at the time, the drummer definitely could not play to a click. And I was like, it came back exactly on the grid. And I was like, okay, so I would just pick up those things just by listening to projects. And I eventually started my own band, went on the road for 4 years, signed a record deal, signed a publishing deal, learned really quickly that doesn't really mean anything. publishing deal, record deal doesn't guarantee you any amount of success.
Your band was Me in Motion, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so, like, just, I'd hate to just kind of in, but like when you started the idea of like even like recording bands, it's funny how it's like, it's like, oh, recording, but it's like, you're already like, I'm a small business. You don't realize you're a small business, but it's like, you're a small business. And you looked at competition instead of being like, oh, that guy sucks, and saying like a blanket statement, big name. But it's like, okay, what can I learn from it? And what can my ear take away from this?
For sure. Yeah. I didn't know what I was doing. And most times today, I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing. It's just a lot of guessing and what I think sounds cool. I don't know any music theory. Like my lowest grade I got in high school was in my music theory class, like out of any class. My brain just doesn't interact with music in that way. It's just, you just have to hear it and feel it, at least for me. So yeah, I know that wasn't really answering your question.
No, but even that statement right there that you said, like, because people go like, well, I need to know all of this important stuff. And like, I need to know all of, okay, so these are modes, these are all my scales, these are all my, and it's like, whoa. I think the core that you said right there, which I probably talk about more than anything, is like, let's just listen to something really quick. And not just like a pass, but like, let's really listen and analyze, like, what are the drums doing? What is the bass doing? What is the melody doing? Do we find a repetition? And can we listen to another song and try to find things that are doing some similar things and look for patterns? I think that's probably more helpful and the best piece of advice for someone starting out than like go to Berklee School of Music.
Oh, for sure. I'm really big on like, if you want to get into music, don't go to school for music. The only thing that will allow you to do is get a teaching job. It's going to the debt side of it. Like if you're able to go through and get your college paid for somehow, I mean, that's great. But in most cases, you're going to leave college with a mountain of debt, and music is not something you get into to make a lot of money. It has to be something you get into because you couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
You couldn't see yourself doing anything else. And that's always what it was for me. It was like, I just had no plan B. It was just music. Like that was it. I didn't know what it was going to look like. Like at first I thought it was going to be the artist thing and pursued that. But as you well know, music doesn't always, like the journey of music is very circuitous. It's over the river and through the woods. And you walk through one door and it turns into something else that you would have never imagined. And before you know it, you have this amazing career that looks nothing like you thought it was going to.
That's what's interesting too, because you set out to be like, I'm going to be the artist, but then it started to transform into something different. And I think some people think, oh no, that's a bad thing. It's like, no. That's exactly what it's going to look like. The thing you may set out to do will probably change. And that's okay, because that's how it organically takes shape. And either you fight against the current or you totally embrace it and dive in full on and be like, cool, well, let's figure this new thing out.
Some people can be stubborn to a fault of like having this one vision of who they are.
Yeah.
And the world doesn't accept them in that way. Then they just get bitter and resentful rather than seeing it as feedback, as like, okay, well, maybe the lane I'm in is not the right lane for me to be in. For me as an artist, that was definitely the case. Like I even had, at one point I had a band, a couple of guys that it was pretty much just me, but I had a couple other guys that were hired. I mean, they were full time with me and they worked their tails off, but it was always kind of my thing. I never really set it up like on purpose that way. It just sort of evolved that way. But I had a drummer that always sort of fancied himself as a songwriter. And I tried on a few occasions and I would listen to his stuff and I'm like, man, this is cool for your stuff. Like what you do artistically is I'd be a fan of it. I just can't see myself singing this. Like It's not really my vibe. It's not good or bad. It's just, but he always fancied himself as a songwriter and he was an amazing drummer. Like he literally could be one of the top Nashville session guys today had he kind of stuck down that road. Like he was that good even back then without having any experience in it. But it just became a thing where he had this idea in his head of like, I'm a songwriter. But sometimes if the world is telling you, hey, you're not a songwriter, you're a really good drummer, you kind of need to listen to the world or listen to God, as I like to look at it as.
But it's kind of true when you got maybe if you get different opinions from 20 different people, it's like, who knows? But if the same people are telling you the exact same thing over and over, it's like, well, maybe that's a thing. Maybe that's the thing I should start to pay attention to more. But it's interesting that you mentioned that he could have been, but then it's almost a point where it's like, are you going to be like super stubborn and be like, no, and then cool just where you are? Or are you willing to adapt to that change almost and be like, well, let's see where this goes?
For sure. And so much of it is just, I'm very pragmatic and I'm a very practical person. And you kind of use the opportunities that are in front of you. And I believe God puts opportunities in front of us for a reason. And if we're not, it's just our job to be observant and see what things come naturally, what things come with very little effort. Mm-hmm. Those are usually the ones that you're meant to be doing, like the things where it doesn't feel like work.
Then when did you start to pivot? Because when you mentioned touring, even touring, I can remember, you just mentioned Ohio, I just can think of tons of places that we used to play that were like small clubs, basement churches, either it was a youth group, I don't know, where was it? It was like a weird place in Ohio, Tip City. I remember Tip City, it was like, but like you don't see, you're sleeping sometimes in a van, you buy a Walmart parking lot, you're taking a half shower in a Walmart parking lot, you kind of get a motel, maybe, but it's like then cramming like 4 dudes to share like 2 beds and be like, all right, this is it. At what point did you go like, okay, I think maybe I needed to give songwriting, not just for me, but for others? You had already started, and songwriting and production for, early on is a form almost, because you're getting into arrangement, you're thinking about that recording. Did it just like continue even while you were in a band, and then it just started to transform even more and more?
Yeah, I always did it on the side. I never made any money from the band. I always lost money. It was, at the end of the day, I would always make a point to pay the guys whether I got paid or not, because that was just the deal. And definitely left that band with a lot of debt. I didn't go to college, so I look at that as like my student loans.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was able to keep producing like indie projects on the side. I would just be working on them in green rooms and stuff, and like in between. It was like 7 days a week, basically. And eventually I got an opportunity to work on a label record. And that was the one that kind of like put me on the map as a songwriter and producer. And then I started to like see income coming in from that. That was like very real income. It's like, okay, so just my pragmatic self, like I'm out here grinding it on the road. I'm exerting all this effort. We're sleeping in those motels, like you said, driving ourselves, many times setting up our own production and stuff. And I'm losing money. Like something's wrong with this equation, like max effort, losing money. It's not that money is always the true answer for why you should make decisions. But for me, it had got to a point where it was just ridiculous. Like I was doing something that I was enjoying. Like I've always loved the songwriting and the production and the creative side of things. Everything else, the marketing, the touring, everything else that goes with being an artist, that's the part that I don't like. And so why was I trying to keep pushing water uphill? It was when I sort of dropped to that. And really what it took was our van blew up in Iowa. Like it was like the last straw. We were broke down in a snowstorm. It was in the middle of the state of Iowa. And I was just like, screw this. I'm going home and this is it. And so we left the van there, left the trailer there. I never went back and got it again. And I just sort of knew like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So that was like the greatest decision ever, because you can really only focus on like one thing and do that very well at any given point. And at that time I was trying to do both and doing neither of them as well as I could.
I can attest to all van issues and like moments where it's just like either there's no air conditioning in the van, it breaks down, you have to get a new one. But just what you said, do you think like too, you did the band route at first because, or at least for me, I thought that was the only option for music. Like it was like, oh, I didn't, nobody came to me and it was like, there's this thing called licensing and there's this thing that you could do. It was more or less like, oh, band was probably all I can do to make it in music. But then as you start to entertain other ideas or start to go towards other ideas, then the thing you were like, I don't want to do that, because I'm kind of the same. I don't really like to, like after a while I was like, I don't like this. I don't like sleeping on floors. I don't like trying to like cram everybody into a room. I don't like having to use the same shirt again after 3 nights wearing it because it's like it kind of smells. But I do like the idea of arranging something and pursuing like a new idea, and then somebody else takes a song and goes with it, or it finds another home.
So, well, you just don't know that stuff until you get into it. And for me, that was really eye-opening, that like, wow, you can make a career writing songs that other artists record. Yeah, it's just, you would just never know. And I didn't know anything about sync licensing. I didn't know that was a thing until probably 3 or 4 years into after I had already been signed and, had a publishing deal.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more ways to make an income in music probably than ever before. It's, in some ways it's harder to break through than ever before, but at the same time, there's a lot more opportunity.
And it just, I think it's something you said, focusing. And I think that's the thing at first, because people are like, well, I want to do it all. Well, you probably can't. So which one do you really enjoy? Like if you had to not get paid for it for like 6 years, would you be okay with that? And would you still get better at it and invest your time? Because yeah, money is important, but probably the time is the most. That's like the, at least for me now, I'm like, oh, my most valuable thing is like time. Like if I'm going to give myself time for something, it better be worth it. And if you're okay with that, then cool, absolutely run with it. Go for it, because you'll probably do well because you're willing to commit to it. If you say like, I want the rewards of it, but I really don't want to give my time for it, then it's like, then you can just stop right now.
Yeah, for sure. Nothing is going to happen quickly. It just isn't that. Like when a lot of people think that it happened really fast for me, but they didn't realize that like when I moved to Nashville, I had my first number one in like 2009, and I was probably 21 or something like that, or 22 at the time.
Yeah.
But they also don't see that, hey, I actually started doing this really young. Like I started in my parents' basement, like full on 10,000 hours, like when I was 15.
Yeah.
Most people, like that's still 7 years in between.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of work that people don't see because they only see when it's good. But it's like if you looked behind the curtain, you would see like all the mistakes, all the things that are like, oh shit, that was not, I didn't mean to do that, wrong. But that's what got you to the point where, oh, now it seems really good. Yeah, because I learned from everything else behind me.
For sure. And you just have to have that season of just grinding. There's no shortcut for that. Like no matter what you want to get into. And that's where even like how we talk to our song chasers community, like I tell a lot of them, hey, for many of you, this thing needs to stay a hobby. Like this doesn't need to be a career. It doesn't mean you will get any less joy out of it if you don't get a number one song, but as long as you can be feeling like you're doing what you want to do and you're growing and you're getting better and your song has an impact somewhere, and that's really all that matters. The moment that you choose to do something as a career, something like songwriting, everything changes. The pressure is on. You end up doing a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's just part of it. Like, and that's it. I'm saying that as in I'm thankful to be doing it. Like, but not every project I've ever worked on is like my proudest moment, right? Some of them are jobs.
And that's interesting because people think like, oh, when you're in the studio, it's just like, yeah, it's a party. And like everybody hits record and they're like, yeah, that's an idea. Or it's just like, I think John Mulaney described writing a song with Mick Jagger for Saturday Night Live. And Mick Jagger was like, no, yes. And John was like, is this how you write songs? It's like, it's completely different. There's sometimes where it is a grinder, just like, wow, this is going nowhere. And it feels like I'm pulling teeth.
Yeah. I love that you referenced that skit, by the way. Me and my daughters use that all the time.
Oh, really?
The thing is like, not funny.
Yes.
Say in our house all the time.
Because I think it's a real thing. There's this mystic that people think it's a party, but it's like, no, it's like when you go to work and you go to a job and you focus and you talk, that's what songwriting is. You sit in, you say your pleasantries, you go, hey, what's up? Cool, let's get to work. Because this is no longer like a precious baby. This is a product that's going to lead us to maybe a cut. This is going to lead to something that's more licensing based. It has something, it needs to get done. There's a timeline. Do the work, and it needs to be good.
Yeah, it's work. I mean, and the longer you do it and the more successful you get, like, I'm thankful for all the successes I've had because I can say no to stuff now.
Yeah.
The point is that you can't have that attitude going in, even after you have your first hit. Like you've got to look at it as, okay, the only thing I need to be thinking about is what's my next one going to be. And I mean, I still think that way. Like, yeah, I end up doing some things that I don't want to do, but I at least have the freedom now to be able to, like, I have a fairly simple filter in my life, and it's basically a no assholes policy. I just don't work with anybody who I don't want to work with. And sometimes you got to try it to find that out, right? But
yeah. I think that's a great policy in general for life, because I think that makes sense, because, you know, sometimes when people do it right, they think of it as a one and done deal. Like, it's just like, oh, we got the right and that's awesome. But it's like, no. The first right is actually just seeing too, like, is this going to be a good partnership, or is this just like, this is the worst deal ever? Like, we have to leave.
Yeah, I almost know what happened the first right. If I get a second right back, then that's the win.
But that makes total sense. So many people think, well, no. The first right is getting a good song. It's like, no. It's a relationship. It's like, are you going to build on it? Is it going to be awesome? Are they going to be like, God, writing with them was the best thing ever? Or are they going to be like, as you said, man, that guy's an asshole. Like, it's just like, is that the first thing that's going to come up? Because that would suck, because it doesn't matter how good you are. Like, oh, I'm a great melody person. Yeah, but you suck. Like, you really suck.
Yeah, you can't be, you just, you know, I mean, some people can get away with that maybe, but I just think life's too short, at least for me personally. I don't really care who your credits are or what you've done. Like, if you're not a good hang in the room and you're, you know, it's just not worth it.
I mean, even Phil Spector, eventually it ran out, and, you know, with all the wigs that he was wearing at the trial, nobody really cared. It was just like, no. And so as you made that pivot, you know, you started to get singles, and yeah, probably once you get like a hit, there has to be even more pressure to be like, people are like, I want that hit. And it's like, yeah, but then there has to be something else afterwards. It can't just be one. But like, how do you work with that pressure of continuing to, how did you deal with that? Like, feeling that pressure, but just continuing to grow without always being like, oh, wow, this is a lot, I need to leave.
I mean, I think it's hard. Like, there's no easy way around it. I mean, there's days that you feel like you suck and you want to quit. I mean, I've had plenty of those, but I don't know. I think it just comes down to like gratitude and being thankful that I get to do this in the first place. And like every day that I can pay my bills doing this, I don't often live up to this aspiration, but I aspire to be a person who's grateful more than anything, just walking in. And like, I think if I can have that attitude going in, and I'm like, this is a win regardless of what comes out of it. I'm here to serve whoever's in front of me. We're going to write the best song we can. And the rest is literally out of my hands. I think there's an element of it where you have to be extremely invested, but you also have to be very disconnected to what happens too, just because we have so little control over it. You kind of just have to write as many songs as you can, and, you know, maybe 5% of them will end up doing anything, and you have to be okay with that.
Ooh, because I think that's the part that people are like, but I'm not okay with that. Well, don't worry, you have to, because as you said, a lot's out of your control, but what's in your control is purely just your reactions and just how you're dealing with people. Like, I geek out over like Brendan Bouchard and like his like Growth Day app, and it's always like morning mindset, and it's like, it's basically like a gratitude thing where it's like, can you find at least 3 things at the beginning and end of your day they were like, that actually went well? And some days it does feel like you have to dig deep, where it's just like, I'm thankful that grateful I remembered to write down 3 things. It could be one of that, but
well, it's not even, we went through a book study in our Song Chasers community about a book called The Gap and the Gain. I don't know if you
I love that. Yeah, Dan Sullivan.
It's concept of like, man, if you can't find anything you're grateful for that day, come up with something that went horribly wrong and what gain came from that. Like, learn to reframe your losses into wins.
I love that book, and Who Not How. I probably read Who Not How like 20 times, because it's like, there's so many good points to that. Now, eventually it was you as a business, but then eventually you started to build your company, Full Circle Music, then how does that, when do you realize too, and I think this is where some songwriters struggle, because building a team to support, because I feel like that's what you eventually built, and a whole networks and structure.
Yeah. Not everybody is meant to do that.
Yeah.
Like, just hear me say that. I've had a lot of friends who have gone into the business side, and I'm like, you're going to hate this and you're going to probably quit in 3 years because you're not going to like hiring and firing and HR and all of that. And I don't like that either.
Yeah.
I think I have this entrepreneurial side of me that I just have to have something going on that I'm building, that I have some control. It's probably a control thing, honestly, just a way to feel more in control of my destiny, even though, none of us really are. But I love the feeling of building things and connecting people and bringing different people together. And it's been hard. Like, that's honestly been a whole new discipline to learn. Like, just because you know how to write a good song does not mean you'll know how to run a good publishing company.
Yeah.
It's two very opposite skill sets. So I started a label, I started a publishing company. I had really good partners with that, and all the setup to win, and it didn't do what I wanted it to. So you have to be okay with sacrificing your things on the altar sometimes. And so that's what we had to do with our publishing and our label. And things feel so much better now. I mean, it's that focus thing. Really, the only thing business-wise I'm focused on right now is the Academy.
Yeah.
Academy. Aside from that, I'm just having fun in the creative process, just writing more than I've ever written before, producing more records than I've ever produced before. So it's really just kind of having that one sole focus.
That's even a testament to, like, just your songwriting career and everything now, to be like, okay, if things don't necessarily work the way that you plan, but what changes can you make? Because sometimes people lie to themselves and they go like, no, it's great. It's great. It's like Kitchen Nightmares, which I'm guilty of watching a million times. Like when they meet Gordon's like, well, what's the food? Rate it. And they're like, it's an 8. And it's like, if Gordon's here already and they set up cameras, that's already a bad thing. So don't start off so high. So you're fooling yourself. And it's like, at what point are they lying? And then Gordon comes in that they realize, oh, maybe it's not what I think it is, or maybe some things need to change. The sooner they embrace that change, things get better. And it's like, in our own life, songwriting wise, career wise, choice wise, the areas we want to go, if we embrace that, it's amazing how, I don't know, just how you said at the end, it feels good. Like, I feel better. Like, it's like, because that is a weight when things aren't going to plan, and you're still carrying that and trying to be like, well, it'll still work out.
I guess it's both and, because as a songwriter, you really have to have the mentality of, I'm going to stick around as long as it takes.
Yeah.
But there also is a time to know when God is telling you, or, the universe is telling you, hey, it might be time to sacrifice something and do something else. So I think it's really individual. You kind of just have to work that out within yourself. And, I'm big on having advisors. Like, I have a business coach I've worked with for years now. I've just invested a lot of money in that side of things just because it's worth it, and it helps sharpen my thinking.
I agree. It's like, I have one for music, I have one for business, because your brain doesn't get shut up. At least mine doesn't, where it's just like, it's always something. And I'm like, oh, but if I'm just holding on to that, like, I'm just going to stay up at night, just thinking the same things. I can journal as much as I want to. I'm still going to come up with other things, but to have someone that's a little further down the road from me, a couple steps down, that can be like, oh, move this over here, that doesn't matter. You have to get rid of that. I can do that for other people and let them know when they hire me. But hearing it sometimes from someone, I'm like, but I don't want to get rid of it. I think it's good. No. You got to get rid of it.
And that's why I love coaches and like investing in that, because there's not very many people in my life who will be honest with me as my business coaches. Like, they won't call me out on stuff, and friends don't always do that. It's not always the job of a friend group, but I just think you have people in your life that tell you the truth, whether you just naturally have them or whether you hire them. You have to have them.
I think, we have a mutual friend, Michael Elsner, and I remember the first time where he was like, hey man, you gotta stop doing this. And I was like, oh man, I don't know. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. Who's telling you this? Okay, what has he done? He's probably right. And then changed some things. And then later on, I was like, you're right. And he was like, hey, see? And so it's funny when that happens. to find people that can be honest, but also give you, here's what's working, but here's what needs fixed. I think sometimes people think, well, I got like criticism, or somebody says this sucks or you're doing it wrong. That's not constructive or anything you can build on, but someone that looks into your full picture and goes like, oh, this is working, but could be tightened up. This, however, really needs addressed. And here's some things to focus on or maybe ask. That's way more constructive, whether it be business, songwriting, production, any frame.
Yeah, I just can't overstate the importance of having that circle of people that you trust, that you can take advice from. And really the big thing too that I see that frustrates me more than anything is like people that do have those people who are speaking into their lives and then they don't do anything with the answer. Like that's the most frustrating thing. Like I've had conversations with so many songwriters who are coming up, and I'll tell them something and I'll know that like maybe 10% of them are actually going to take what I said and do anything with it. And that's just the reality. Like most people are just scared to take action.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because like on the music side, like Judy Sakey, who's been like huge in helping me, I was like, how come some people don't do these things? And exactly what she said. She was like, because I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. And I was like, oh, I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, I didn't say it was good or validate what they were thinking. She was like, but a percentage will go like, I should probably work on that. Now, I think with all the framework that you've done, both in like, you know, from building your career, I feel like that's what's prepped you to be a seasoned songwriter. I mean, for you, what is like a write like? What is your main, and everyone can look different, and, you know, each session depending on what it's for. But, you know, do you have kind of like a structure or kind of a framework that you kind of go to that you use?
Man, I'm just big on speed. Like I'm big on not overthinking things. I think there's a time to edit, but like when you're in the writing and the creative process, it's just like not over editing yourself. I think for me, that's so much of it is I just try to keep the room moving. Like that's because if there's somebody who I can sense is in the room as like a thinker and they're an editor and they're a processor, I'll let them have their space to do that. But at the same time, I'll try to keep it moving forward. Like, hey, you've been stuck on this course for like an hour. Let's work on, I'm not afraid to just say, hey, let's start something completely different. Like even if we've worked on something for 2 hours and I'm like, this is not heading anywhere, I'm okay with sacrificing everything we just did and pivoting. So I'm just big on trying to keep momentum in the room. I don't know. I mean, all the normal stuff, you know, just using tracks, like throwing out a ton of different melodies. I'm a big melody first guy. I mean, Nashville can be very like lyric centric, which is great. That's why a lot of people are coming here, because they want songs that have meat and content and meaning to them. And so, you know, while that's important, I still am a firm believer that everything kind of has to bow to the melody.
I feel the same way, because it's like you could say the most important thing, but if it's not in a way that I can remember, I probably won't remember it. But you could say, I mean, here we are several years later, and somebody can say, under my umbrella, Ella, Ella. And I'm just like, oh, it's stuck in my head.
Yeah. I've written so many songs that have the most brilliant lyrics with amazing lyric writers that have never done anything. And then I've written other songs that are so crazy simple and they're just hooky and catchy. And more often than not, the simple ones are the ones that end up resonating. But it takes work to get there. It's a lot like experimenting, trial and error, moving syllables around, experimenting with phrasing, experimenting with rhythm and meter, stretching notes out, playing with where does stuff fall in relation to the downbeat. Like it's a lot of that just math stuff that I think that I think about in the writing process, and it just goes such a long way.
But I think too that how you said don't overthink it. I think that's where people get caught in their own heads. Like, you know, someone doesn't say even the beginning of a phrase because they're worried it's not perfected yet. So let me just be quiet and just hold on to it. It's like, no, the whole idea of co-writing is you say whatever comes in your head, which is going to spark something from me, because the whole point is you don't have to finish the idea. You say half of it. And I'm going to finish the other half. Or sometimes I've said the wrong thing and they go, oh, that's perfect. And then they say that. And I was like, I didn't say that at all, but that's way better. But you just misheard me. And that's in just getting it out, get the structure out, and then we can look at it and be like, okay, now let's go in and maybe like tweak it, but not I don't know, if we're overthinking and spending like an hour on a verse when it's like we don't even have a chorus, it's like, let's not do that.
Yeah, always start with the chorus. If you can get the hook down, then work backwards from there. That's 100%, almost 100% of the time.
Now, would you say too, with production, with your background, when you started out very early on, just recording friends, was that a natural flow too with your writing, where it was just like they weren't separated, but it was just like, it's just kind of one and the same for me?
It's always been one and the same. I didn't really know what it was called back then. It was just recording and helping and producing and writing, but that's what it was. It was producing and writing. It's just speaking into different aspects of the songwriting. I mean, at that time, I wasn't as involved on the lyric side. It was kind of like the singer would go off in some back room and write a part of it, but then I would help him tweak it and tweak the melodies and phrasing and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it was really the same process then, just trying to help everybody have a good time and like make it not feel too much like work. I think that's so much of it. When you can hear when records are overthought, you got your Mutt Lange extremes of like spending 10 days on one kick drum sound for one song, but I just don't know that somebody like him, if he were coming out today, like would he thrive in today's songwriting environment? Probably not. Like nobody has the patience for that.
It's kind of like, I think I mentioned, but like Phil Spector, I think it was like Rock and Roll High School. It was the first chord that he made him play that intro again and again and again. We're finally, it was like, I'm out of here. What are you going to do, Phil? Shoot me? And just like walked out of anger. Because that probably wouldn't fly today either. It's something to be said about like the mood and the atmosphere, especially if you're like producing it. It's like you're controlling the environment. And if you see things like taking a turn, like, they're getting inside their head or they're getting frustrated, let's just go to this part and let's just come back to this later. It's like you have to pivot. It's almost like you're trying to see the emotional feel of everyone.
Well, I'm just trying to take perfectionism out of the room because perfection gets in the way of good art and good songs. It's just, anytime we start, there is no perfect. Like I could analyze the biggest hit song from last year and find 5 things I would do different about it. But that doesn't matter.
I feel like it's one of those things. Yeah, it's like we can improve on some things, but also too, what made it a hit song? I'm always interested where it's like, what was the thing? Was it the climate, the environment? Was it just like something in the melody? Take it, extrapolate it, I guess. And then just like, there we go. That's in the toolbox. That's in the well. So when I go writing, it's going to naturally come up. So I feel like, are you just also a consumer of music besides just a creator, but just like constantly listening to things?
Man, I don't listen as much as I want to or as much as I should. When Spotify came out, like you would think it would have gone the opposite way, but I think I just got so into the podcast world and into like audiobooks.
Yeah.
Like if I'm driving in the car, I'm way more apt to just put on a podcast. I don't listen to music that much. It's just like I'll listen to it if like Emma, who I'm working with right now, she'll turn me on to like Yeba is an amazing artist. She just turned me on to. Yeah. And so I'll like go on these rabbit trails of like listening to Yeba stuff for a while. And it's just seasons, right? Like but I don't think I listen probably as much as I should.
What are like the top podcasts you've been listening to?
Man, my podcast list is all over the place. It's kind of schizophrenic if you were to look at it. I was into Radiolab for a while. The American podcast with John Hamm is amazing. I just listened to that one. What's the one with Sean Hayes and Will Arnett and Jason Bateman?
Oh, that one. Yeah. I know which one.
Yeah, it's just hilarious.
Have you heard the one with Dana Carvey and David Spade? They're basically just interviewing old Saturday Night Live cast members.
I have on my list to check out. I have moments that I think David Spade is funny, but then like I don't know. I've never really thought he was that funny. Dana Carvey's pretty hilarious though.
Dana Carvey is hilarious, and it's just very interesting, some of the stories and the background stories. Still love Song Exploder. That's probably one that I've gone back to a whole bunch. Yeah,
Song Exploder. I mean, the Ross Golan one's really good.
Yeah.
Always love that one. For a while, well, I mean, Rick Barker's a friend of probably both of us. He has a great one on the music side of things. Yeah, I mean, it's literally just, and my pastor from my church has a podcast that I listen to. It's just so eclectic. It's all over the place.
They're probably looking like, is this like a family plan? Is this everyone? Or is this like, this can't be
Yeah,
one person?
I don't know how Apple or Spotify would know how to recommend anything to me because it is so all over the place.
So confused by the algorithms. And it's like, what ads do we send them? I don't know. Frankly.
We don't.
We can't send them anything. But dude, so if people are listening to this and they're like, okay, I still want to be a songwriter. I still want to, what's, definitely the piece of advice to start doing that, especially if they're like, I don't know where to start. It all seems overwhelming.
Yeah, write songs. So you don't need to go to school for it. You don't need to be qualified for it. You don't have to have music theory training. You don't just write songs and study great writers and pattern. When you're starting out, like it helps to sort of pattern your stuff after great writers. Even taking like this, a really good exercise that a lot of people could do, and they can try it right now, is like write new melodies for some of your favorite song lyrics, and then do the flip side on lyrics. Write new lyrics to some of your favorite melodies. It'll just help you learn, like, okay, this is what a good melody feels like, or this is what a good lyric feels like, and not being all learned by imitation in the beginning. And sometimes, like, just even doing that 10 times or 20 times, then the 21st song you write will be that much better because you have sort of ingested all of this. But co-writing is really probably the biggest game changer, at least if you're trying to do this on a professional level. Co-writing really was the thing that sort of changed the game for me. It helps you to not overthink things. It helps you to create a lot, which is really what you have to do. It's not a numbers game, but it is a numbers game, as my friend Rusty Gaston likes to say.
It is, where it's just like, yeah, it isn't, but it kind of is. So just keep on going. And it's just like, well, what if the co-write doesn't turn out well? Well, the first couple may not turn out well. It may be a horrible train wreck. That's okay, because that's part of the I think it's like, no, it's all part of the process. It's like, it's not going to be great, but keep on going with it because it does get better. Like, nothing in the beginning is always the greatest.
No. And just because you can, I go back to the gap in the gain. Like, look at where you were 10 years ago. And I bet you're better off than you were back then. Like, it's as long as you're getting better and as long as you're pushing forward, that's really all that matters.
Dude, this has been awesome. And if somebody's listening, they're like, well, where do I follow more of your stuff? Where can I find out what you offer? Where can they go to?
Yes. I have a URL. I'm going to make sure I tell you the right URL.
Excellent.
You can tell how much I don't know what's going on. People can go to joinsongchasers.com. We have a songwriting community that people can meet other co-writers. They can get ongoing training, feedback, song critiques, have access to a really cool track building tool that we created. And that's all at joinsongchasers.com. They can get on the wait list for that. It's not something we have open all the time, just because it is a community and we want it to be personal enough to where we can actually feel like we're making a difference in our members' lives. We don't just have it open all the time. So they can get on the wait list for that at joinsongchasers.com.
That's awesome. Seth, thanks for taking a bit of your day to talk to us, because this was awesome.
Man, thanks for having me.
And that does it for this week's episode. It was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.